Welcome to Pure Nonfiction, the podcast interviewing documentary filmmakers. I'm your host, Tom Powers, the documentary programmer for the Toronto International Film Festival and artistic director of Doc NYC. On today's episode, I talked to Morgan Spurlock. He burst upon the scene in 2004 with his film Super Size Me, in which he ate nothing but McDonald's for a month. After that film, he formed the company Warrior Poets with producer Jeremy Chilnick. Their latest film is called Rats, based on Robert Sullivan's book. Unlike many of Morgan's previous projects, he doesn't appear in this one. Instead, center stage is given to New York City exterminator Ed Sheehan. The film also travels to other locales, including Cambodia, to follow the economy of rat catching, and to Rajasthan, India, where rats are celebrated at a temple. Rats was conceived to fit the genre of horror as much as documentary. The film plays on the Discovery Channel starting October 22nd. Its world premiere took place in September at the Toronto International Film Festival in the Midnight Madness section. The next morning, I sat down with Morgan Spurlock and Jeremy Chilnick. I started by asking Morgan where he was in his career before Super Size Me.
Before Super Size Me, I had a production company. We were actually started off as a web company. I started a company called the Interactive Consortium, terrible name, right in the middle of the tech boom. And the whole idea when I was raising money for this in 1999 was we wanted to create a company where we could put programming online, short-form content that we would then seed, pilot it, if you will, and then springboard it off to film or television, something like is happening all over now. And the first show we launched, we were able to raise $250,000 for the company. We were trying to raise millions. Then the bubble burst in like March of 2000. All the tech money dried up. But I had one guy named Marty Garvey who still wrote me a check for $250,000. And so we took that money to create our first show. And game shows had just hit in America. Like the number one show in the United States was Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And it went from one night a week to 2 nights a week to 5 nights a week. Like suddenly this one show blew up and I was like, we need to do a game show. That's the show we should make. So we created a show online called I Bet You Will. What's your name? Christy. Come here, Christy. Okay. Christy's from Big Sky Country. She's from Montana. Now she's in Big Money Country here at I Bet You Will with Extra. And we've got a big bet for some big cash for you, all right?
It depends on what I got to do.
I will pay you $100 cash for every jar of I Bet You Will brand rotten yogurt you let me pour all over your body. I've got 3 jars. So for each jar, it'll be $100. That exploded online. Within the first day, we had 1 million unique views on the site. It was crashing like crazy. By Friday, we had 5 million views. By the second week, CBS called and said, we want to buy the show. And I was like, oh my God, look how easy this is. Everything that we'd said we were going to do with this company is happening right now. We ended up selling the show to MTV. CBS sat on it for months. And while they sat on it, all these big giant shows came out. Survivor, Big Brother, Fear Factor in the fall. And I was like, that's what we should be making I Bet You Will as. It should be like that show, but huge. They didn't want to do it. We got the show back, sold it to MTV, ended up doing 53 episodes of the show for them. And then when they canceled the show in October of 2002, I had about $50,000 in the bank. And I said, we should take that money and we should make
Feels like you should have had more money in the bank after doing a whole year of shows.
Because here's the whole thing is what I didn't tell you in the story is so while we were sitting on the show, when we sold it to CBS, 9/11 happened. So production kind of stopped in New York City. Everything stopped. And to keep my company going, I just started taking out credit. And I started taking out credit cards. And so I started paying employees with credit cards. I started paying bills with credit cards. I started paying credit cards with credit cards. And in a period of about a year and a half, I amassed about $250,000 in credit card debt. And so, but I still had an office. Like I was evicted from my apartment. I was sleeping in a hammock in my office, but I still had an office. So I was like, we're not dead yet. I still got this one thing that I was hanging on to. We've got MTV who's saying we're going to make the show at some point. Finally, in the spring of 2002, they said, let's move forward. We want to make the show. And then we want to do 53 episodes of that show. So I paid off about $50,000 worth of the debt during production of that show. And then when it was canceled, we had another 50. And I said, well, I could either pour this $50,000 into that bottomless pit of debt, or we could make a movie. Because that was logical. And that movie ended up being Super Size Me.
There are rules to what's going on here in this whole process. I will only supersize it
if they ask me, and I can only eat things that are for sale over the counter at McDonald's. Water included. If McDonald's doesn't sell it, I can't eat it. I have to have everything on the menu at least once over the next 30 days, and I have to have 3 squares a day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. No excuses. Oh, I love Big Macs too. See, this is probably the first time in a long time that I've actually seen a Big Mac that looks like the picture. That actually almost looks like the picture. Look at that. Big Macs never look this good. You gotta come to Chinatown for the good Big Macs.
Before the world saw Super Size Me, you'd completed this film. You've got debt more than anything in your life at that point. You've
had a lot of debt. Yeah,
and maybe chutzpah. Maybe your chutzpah slightly is ahead of your debt. What were your expectations going into the Sundance Film Festival?
Well, we got to go back before we got into Sundance, because I was still with John. John Sloss was my lawyer and was our sales agent for the film. And I love John Sloss because John Sloss is a spectacular manager of expectations. That is, if John is anything, that is what he does a great job of doing for filmmakers. And so we'd finish the film, we'd submit it to Sundance. We didn't know what was going to happen with the movie, didn't know if we were going to get in. And John's like, yeah, maybe you'll be able to sell this to TV, because I don't know who's really going to buy this film, what's going to happen. Then the movie got into Sundance and John Sloss calls me up and he goes, this is going to be huge. This is going to be so great. So I didn't know, but when I tell you what happened, before we went to Sundance in the beginning of December, there was a cartoon that somebody sent me from the Park Record, where the lunar lander or the Mars rover had just landed on Mars. And so there was a cartoon of a Mars rover and a Martian coming up to the Mars rover saying, hey, I'll show you some really cool Martian rocks if you can get me tickets to Super Size Me. And that was a cartoon in the paper that somebody said, I don't know if you saw this. And I was like, that's amazing. I just got chills telling you that story, because people were like, the movie sold out so fast. Everybody's talking about it. So at that point, we thought we were going to have a great experience, but we had no idea what was going to happen.
Seems like pretty quickly you went from being a guy in debt that no one would recognize on the streets to being a public personality.
Yeah.
What was that shift like?
Well, there was and I'll put it in the context of the Sundance Film Festival, because there was an amazing moment when James Rocky, the journalist, the film reviewer, was at the festival. And for years, like every other filmmaker who had watched the Sundance Film Festival, I watched people's lives be transformed by this amazing festival, whether it's Kevin Smith.
Or at least that's the 2 stories that would get told, and then the other 98 people whose lives
did not. Yeah, but it's like, so every year you'd see these people like Kevin Smith or Quentin Tarantino or whomever, these people that would come to Sundance with these little tiny movies that would be transformative. And so I'm at a party, and James Rocky comes up to me and he goes, so how does it feel? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, how does it feel to be the belle of the ball? He goes, this is your Sundance. And at that moment, I was like, holy shit, like I'm that guy. I'm Cinderella. I am the person whose life's never going to be the same after this festival. And it wasn't. It was incredible.
And is that all positive? Is there any downside to that?
No, I mean, it was. I had a great group of people and great supportive group of friends and family. And I think that it could have been spectacularly overwhelming, but it wasn't. My wife was incredibly wonderful and like just keeping me grounded through that whole process. And I think just having people around who were just as excited about everything that was happening as I was wonderful. Yeah. Because that was the other thing. That was one thing I'll add to that, is that part of what was so special about so the whole time we were making the movie, nobody was getting paid. And so we had about 25, 26 people who were working at my company and who were working on this movie at the time who weren't getting paid because we didn't have any money. And we made this Super Size Me for $65,000. So the minute we got into Sundance, like I cashed in an annuity that my grandmother had that she had been saving money for me. It was like $50,000 so that 1, I could finish the film. And then 2, I took every single person who worked on the movie to Sundance. I flew 27 people to Sundance for the movie. And I said, we all have to experience this together. And we all went, we rented a house. It was special in every sense of the word.
I think there's a perception after that Super Size Me is a big success. That you read figures of how much it made at the box office, and was that transformative, or was that a lot of money going into other people's pockets?
A lot of money going into other people's pockets. I mean, it made money. We paid off all my debt. Everybody who worked at my company, because people hadn't gotten paid in so long, we paid people. I paid everybody in my company like between 3 and 4 years of back salary. So everybody, the company was making anywhere between $150,000 and $400,000, depending on who they were. So, I mean, I could have made a lot more money personally, but I felt it was much more important for me to do right to all the people who'd been there for so long And we started a new company with Jeremy, my partner who's sitting here with me. We started Warrior Poets. I didn't go buy a boat. I didn't go like get a swank Ferrari or anything like that, which maybe in hindsight I should have, but I didn't. And but it was one of those where I think we put the money that we made from that in a good place. And it's one of those movies that still makes money. Like we still get checks for that movie, which is remarkable.
So can we just insert a disclaimer right now for any filmmaker listening to this to not try that at home?
Do not try that. Well, there's been plenty of people who've done movies like that in the past. So I'm sorry for encouraging this. Yeah.
So Jeremy, tell me, when you entered the picture, what was your ambitions to do out of that success?
Well, I started working at the tail end of Super Size Me.
Like fall 2004.
Fall 2004. I mean, the amazing thing, I think, also about when I look back about Super Size Me and Morgan, celebrity kind of grew slowly. Like, because as big as a success as Super Size Me was in the theaters, it's still, it really proliferated once it's on DVD and once it's on home video. So success, like as much as it was immediate, also kind of had this gradual longer tail, which now like everything is kind of like a movie is a success immediately or a movie is not a success. There's no, it feels like it's much more binary now than when, things could really gradually, get some legs underneath them. But my personal ambition was, it sounds cliched, but I really wanted to tell stories. And it was the Bush years, and I don't know if I would have been as attracted to nonfiction and to documentaries as a whole if that wasn't going on. But it felt like at the time documentaries were kind of the only voice that was speaking for things that you would read and you would feel, because what was mainstream media at the time was so pervasive in this kind of one narrative. And I was very lucky. I got onto the elevator just as it was starting to slowly ascend, and I haven't gotten off yet.
We'll be back in a minute to talk Rats with Morgan Spurlock and Jeremy Chilnick. Remember to mark your calendars for Doc NYC, America's largest documentary festival, taking place November 10th to 17th in New York City. The full lineup has been announced, with over 250 films and events and over 300 special guests. For documentary professionals, check out Doc NYC Pro, 8 days of panels, masterclasses, and happy hours. Speakers include Citizen4 director Laura Poitras and Black Panthers director Stanley Nelson. To learn more about getting a pass or tickets, go to docnyc.net. Now let's return to Morgan Spurlock and Jeremy Chilnick. Here's a clip from Rats that evokes the eerie qualities that make it fitting for Halloween season.
We will try and solve the rat problem. Or at least knock it down. I'm not trying to justify going out with the dogs and doing it, but where do you stop?
Go, it's gonna run.
Do you stop a spider getting a fly and kill all spiders? It's the same thing.
And what drew you to horror as a genre, as like trying to make a horror documentary, which there's not that many examples. In fact, I can't really think of one.
Yeah. Well, I can think of one. It premiered last night at midnight. And it was the idea behind it, I mean, it's ever since I was a kid, I loved horror films. Like when I was 10 years old, I went to see Scanners in the movie theater. And when Michael Ironside made that guy's head explode, it changed my life forever, because that was the moment that made me want to make movies. Like that, just that one cinematic moment, I was like, oh my God, that's incredible. I got to meet Cronenberg yesterday and gush all over him and tell him, how transformative that was for me. And he goes, I hope in a good way. And I was like, no, it was very good. But I've always loved horror films. I love the way they make you feel. I love how uncomfortable they make you. They make you squirm and a little just edgy, on the edge of your seat. And I said, if we can make a doc that plays into that, in that space, plays into that negative space of tension and of fear, of kind of I think excitement, then we'd be doing something really cool. And I think we pulled it off.
What came first? Was it the idea that you wanted to make a horror film, or Rats as a concept brought to you? Or
well, we've talked about making a horror film for a long time, and and just what would that be, and because I've been going down the path of making a narrative feature a couple different times, and I was like, do I want a horror film to be the first narrative feature I make, or do we want to do something else? And I didn't really want it to be, because my fear was that suddenly I'm the guy who makes horror films, and I didn't want to kind of just be painted into that corner. So then when Josh Braun, our friend Josh Braun, who optioned the book Rats with his brother Dan, David Coe, and Stanley Buckthall, he said, what do you think about making this? And I read it and I was like, that's what we should do. Let's make this into a horror movie, but shoot it like a doc, but also shoot it like a horror film, and score it like a horror film, and make it dark and weird like a horror film. And it's awesome.
So the obvious immediate challenge to Rats is there's not a story there. There's not a beginning, middle, and end. So what was your approach to...
There's great source material in the book, but at the end of the day, the book
it's much more historical.
It's much more historical, and it's kind of a bit opposed to what our overall vision was. But I think we started with Morgan had a great in our first meeting is like, who are our characters, who's our Quint, who's our Richard Dreyfuss character from Jaws, and we kind of just really like brainstormed out like, in the perfect world, and we do this with most of our movies, what would it be like in the perfect world? And then you start shooting and it totally changes. But we started rooting in good characters, and then the next thing was, well, how do we get all around the world? Because to keep it in New York, the film starts feeling very insular, and ultimately it doesn't have a lot of places to go, because the end result is there are a lot of rats in New York City, and you don't have much to go past there. But we started with who's one or two or three characters we can ground this in to at least get us started. And then you start researching what are the most f***ed up stories about rats, around the world. And
luckily there's a lot.
And luckily there's a lot, and then you see which ones can kind of fit into this vision that, Morgan has in terms of, what makes it horror and, what's going to be scary about it. So we had a great, main character in this amazing rat exterminator, Ed Sheehan, who, you couldn't write a better, what do you want, like, the New York exterminator to be, who's seen it all for 40 years and sounded all and smoked cigars all the time. And we have him smoking cigars in the interview.
Rats are very intelligent, more intelligent than I think we give them credit for. However you kill them, you kill them. But for every action on our part, there's a reaction on their part. They're observant. They know the area. They're always alert about what's going on. Listen, they're scary. But I gotta respect them. After almost 50 years, they jump out. I'm jumping back.
Now, did Ed Sheehan present himself early on, or did you do a casting call for several different exterminators?
We started looking. We put the call out to it. We were chasing exterminators around New York City, just saying we're looking for somebody who's kind of the quintessential New York exterminator, the guy who's been doing this for decades. And everybody's like, "Oh, you got to call Ed Sheehan. Like if you're looking for that, you got to call Ed." Like so many people were pointing us towards him, and so then we called Ed, and that's like, "What do you want from me?" I was like, "We want to make a movie." He goes, "What for? What's this about?" Like it's like we had to convince him to do it, but then once we got in kind of his good graces, he's phenomenal because he's Quint. He's the guy on the boat who's like, 500 men jumped in the water that day. It's like he's got this great gruff voice. He's a natural storyteller, and he becomes our crypt keeper essentially over the course of the film. Like he's the guy who helps take us in and out of stories through his dark stories and kind of his look at the world and of rats in a very specific way. It's great.
So you do go to many different places in the world to film different crazy rat stories. I mean, in my mind, I imagine that you probably have a team of researchers who will scope out, here's a story in India, here's a story in Cambodia, prepare you, and then set you on a plane to go do it. And I imagine when you're arriving these places, you've got a limited amount of time to get that story. Can you walk me through like what your planning is? Like, how do you drop down in a place you've never been before and get what you need?
Yeah, I mean, usually we do start, as you said, with our team of producers on the film. So there's myself, Jeremy, Suzanne Hillinger, who's another producer on the film, and then our APs, who they're basically doing exactly the research that, like, what are the greatest rat stories we can find? We whittle that down. Then we start reaching out to the people, seeing if there's a there, Skyping with them, talking to them on the phone, whittle it down even more, maybe have them, get a fixer on the ground who goes out and just does some shooting to show us what the characters look like. Because it's a big burden to spend money to go on a fishing expedition if you don't know you're going to get there and actually get something. So having somebody in advance just do a little shooting with like their phone or even another camera just so we can see it. And so we can like, that's cinematic. That's great. Those are good characters. So that then when we get there, we've ticked off 9 out of 10 boxes of what we know we want to accomplish. You never get everything because especially with documentaries, you never know what you're going to get until you get there. But a lot of it is done very much in advance and with like really reliable people on the ground. I mean, we were really lucky. We had some great fixers all over the world that kind of came in and helped us see this through.
What the complexities of this film were in particular is because we've made the commitment that it needs to be a horror film, that takes a whole nother level of planning. So even, we're shooting with big camera systems, on the ground in most places, and you want to set up, you want to have good setup. And Morgan and I were talking about this earlier today, like a lot of what makes horror films and is the tension, and it's what you're not seeing and what are you preparing to see. And so that was a whole different kind of level of complexities, and then in addition, you still have to wait for the rats to either come out or not come out, for the rat catchers to either catch the rats or not catch the rats. But it's, I think those challenges are what makes doing a movie like this so exciting.
So what kind of rat wrangling took place in this film?
There's some rat wrangling where we did some real intimate shots with rats, like in apartments and kind of underground. There were those moments in the beginning of the film when we were going out and shooting in New York City with Ed and some other characters where we weren't seeing any rats. And I was like, I tell you, so Jeremy had a conversation, Jeremy and Suzanne and myself, and we're like, we've got a rat movie with not a lot of rats right now. It's like, we got to figure this out. Like, we got to go find some rats. And we basically, we were making sure that wherever we were going out to shoot, we were like really in the rattiest of ratty places that we could find. Otherwise we were going to have a rat movie with no stars, no subjects.
Yeah, it was literally the first, I'd say the first 7 days of shooting, which is like a lot of shooting on, movies that don't have a lot of budget. Like very, very few rats. We had a rat carcass and it was like, Eureka, we're so close.
That's right.
So what did it take to get the rats out?
Well, it took us just being smart about where we were going location-wise. That was one. Certain times when we were shooting was the other, because we were shooting at times that weren't prime rat times. Prime rat times are early in the morning or like dusk in the evening, because that's when they're usually coming out for food. And so we made sure that now we started having our blocks when we were going to our ratty parts of town and our ratty areas that were in like kind of prime rat hunting time.
You use a lot of visual tricks to capture these rats. You have images of rats running through pipes. Can you talk about some of the gear that you were using? Can we geek out for a moment on your film gear?
Yeah, sure. So the film was shot, about 90% of it shot on Alexa Mini with really beautiful old primes. We have a wonderful director of photography, Luca Del Pepo, who is I think he's a genius.
He's a proper talent. That guy is so good.
Yeah, but we started working with him on our Showtime series, 7 Deadly Sins. So, but he comes from, he's like an AFI guy and like really comes from a totally non-documentary world. And that's what we wanted to bring into this film. But it's a lot of telescopic lenses. We had, I don't know if there's another term for this, like a colonoscopy cam,
like
an endoscopy cam. It doesn't have to just go.
Yeah,
there,
it's a giant phallus lens that is about 2 feet long, like a snoot lens.
Yeah.
That enables you to go into the rat holes and into the burrows, and it creates such this claustrophobic experience because of how it can go into things in a non-sexual way. What we loved about it is it just created a much more rat POV, and part of what we want to do is have that kind of also set the tone for us. Like if you watch the film, there's a lot of really low angles, a lot of rat POV shots taking us into the burrows and into their worlds in a very, I think, dark way. And then when we went in, the way that some of those were shot was enabled us to have just enough light to where you could see, but not enough to where you could see everything, which I think it's, as we talked about earlier, the thing that you love about horror films is what you don't see most of the time that makes things even scarier.
Now, did you have to make a decision at some point whether you're making rats as your villain or whether you're going to try to evoke some sympathy for rats?
This is a conversation that we had as we continue to put the movie together. We were like, we need something sympathetic. Like, we need something in there that isn't all just about how terrible rats are, because first off, I will say rats are terrible. Like, they carry a lot of disease. They have the ability to infect and hurt a lot of people. I mean, they are essentially they're almost like parasites within our society. They live more off of us than we need them. But so we said, but there are things, like we have a lot of scientists in the film who do a lot of research that talk about the benefits of rats and what they show us about society at large. But we said there has to be something else. And that was kind of where the rat temple came in. Once we knew we were shooting in India, I said, we should probably just go and spend a day at the rat temple and shoot there. And
if you're making a film about rats,
that's right.
Gotta go to the rat temple.
And it's one of the things where I'm so glad it was tacked on at the end. It was one of those, we were going to shoot the night rat killers in Mumbai, which are a group of guys that go out every night armed with basically just like a burlap sack and a stick and a flashlight and a net. These guys actually carry a net as well. And they go out and just whack rats with sticks, break their necks, put them in a bag. If they kill 30 rats a night, they get $5 essentially. And it's an incredible story. I'd seen some raw footage on the news of them a while back, and I said, we have to go shoot there. And then once we were going halfway around the world, I was like, well, we may as well tack on another day and go to the temple. And thank goodness we did, because I think it really creates that magical, sympathetic thing that you're just talking about that I think the film really needed.
And so for people who haven't seen the film yet, describe what goes on at the rat temple.
The rat temple is a temple where they worship the rats that are there. There's about 35,000 rats in this temple that live, breed, continue to breed. But the belief is, it's a Hindu temple. The belief is that when we die as humans, we come back as rats. So these rats are their relatives. So they go there, they feed them, they hang out with them, they play with them, they sleep with them. So there's people that are like laying there with rats all over them. They're drinking out of these giant bowls of milk that the rats drink out of and defecate in and everything else. And like these guys, they'll just come and drink milk out of these giant bowls. It's one of those things that will make you incredibly uncomfortable. But simultaneously, you're like, at least as one woman says, this is the one place in the whole world where the rats get to live. And I was like, that's it. And she summed it all up. Like, that is it. And on planet Earth, like if you're a rat, if you had rat Shangri-La, that's where you want to be. Yeah.
The sound design in Rats is very carefully handled. Yeah. Can you talk about what went into the sound design?
We have a brilliant, genius, magical, insane editor named Pierre Takal, who is also an incredibly brilliant, talented composer who, I mean, sound is a big part to us. It's even, I mean, the way Pierre looks at scenes and cuts scenes it's even more to him. And whether it be music that he goes home and scores at night or all the little bits of sound design that he layers in there, there's more sound design on this movie than I think there's ever been in any movie we've ever made.
Yeah, I mean, and it's very nuanced too, but we initially when we got into the edit, we kind of, had like, a very esoteric conversation of just, what should the movie sound like, and just, what are kind of, there's a lot of, keys and chords that you hear throughout the film. They're modulated in different way. There's a ton of low end in the whole movie. Like there's definitely more low end in the whole movie. And also kind of what the format allows to do is, especially when you watch in a theater, we play around with, everything's in the surrounds. And the music swells, so you're always feeling it, because that's the thing, you want that tension. Like there's so much low end in the movie where it's like you just feel like there's something always underneath you and something that's always about to creep up behind you.
Yeah.
But it's a choice that we made right from the beginning of just, what happens when we just kind of keep this tone throughout like a scene, and what happens when we take it away.
We done called 311 1,000 times about this corner right here. They come and said we don't have a rat problem. What? All right. Here we go. Thousands of rats running around. Thousands of them. Oh, pick that bag right there. Here they come. Back. And if you come late at night, they running across the street and everything. Yeah, they said we don't have a rat problem.
There's always more. Unbelievable. Look, all the young ones.
It's more rats in New York City than it is people.
Wow, the monster.
Y'all seen more rats run out of here than how many of us right here?
Oh my God.
Look at all that food. That is untouched Italian New York City bread.
Listen, Saturday nights is the best night to come. See thousands of rats out here. You can stand across the street and just shoot them.
We said this is our chance to really have fun with the sound design in a way that we've never been able to, because the film and the format itself kind of would free us up to do that. It enables us to kind of play and make it more scary. And with horror films, it's not only what you don't see, but it's also what you hear. So how could we help make that sound an added frightening part of our character development?
And besides like musical sounds, you also hear like rat bones cracking.
You hear them running through like ceiling tiles. You hear the little sounds of where they're around. It's great.
So is that stuff like natural sound that you're amplifying, or are you sometimes using post effects to create some of those things?
It's a combination of both. Like especially with like the rats breaking, we had that natural sound that we then kind of sweetened up in the mix to really bring out the cracks and the popping of their necks as you heard that, because it's just so good. But there's times where we were filming where you could hear things run through the ceiling, but it wasn't as good enough sound. And so those are things where you layer in better to make it pop a bit more, make the scurries kind of come out a bit more clear. Yeah.
Heighten the reality.
We heighten the reality.
So normally a hallmark of a Morgan Spurlock movie is that it has Morgan Spurlock in it, and this doesn't. How'd that decision get made?
Because I said I want to make a good movie, so I'm not going to be in it. Listen, when Discovery came on board and wanted to put the film, believe me, there were a lot of conversations. We're like, we think you should be in the movie. And I'm like, that's not the movie we're making. It's a very different film. I think there's films that, make sense for me to be in, where I'm taking you on this vicarious journey and we're learning and experiencing things together. And it feels like you could have made a rat movie that way. Totally. We could have, but it would have been a very different rat movie. It would have been something else. And it would not have been a horror movie. No, not at all. And I think that the film still has a lot of levity and humor in it, but I think it's much darker. I feel like suddenly when I'm in there, it would have been a different piece. So it was a decision we made from minute one that this was not going to be that type of a film. Yeah. Save this ugly mug for something else, like podcasts. I've got a face made for podcasts.
Well, your face has done pretty well as the lead of CNN's Inside Man and lots of other things. And it makes me wonder, given that you're doing TV shows, you do web things, when you come back to do a feature-length documentary film
that I'm not in,
that you're not in even, what is it about that format that attracts you? The
feature films.
Yeah.
I will just, Jeremy touched on it earlier. I think movies are forever. Movies transcend borders. Movies are a global experience. And they're one of those things that I came into this business and really kind of got the launch of my career as a filmmaker, and it's one of the things that I want to do forever. I think that we're in a good place. We're in a very fortunate place where we can make TV and we can make shorts and we can make branded content, but we can also still get to make movies.
Besides Rats, Morgan and Jeremy's company helped produce another film coming out this fall. Eagle Huntress, directed by Otto Bell, profiles a 13-year-old girl in Western Mongolia named Ashel Pan who trains wild eagles. That role is normally held by men in her culture. The film has stunning cinematography and narration by Daisy Ridley.
Meet Ashel Pan. She's 13 years old. She's strong. She's brave. And she's a total natural. But when the competition ends, the real test begins.
I asked Morgan and Jeremy how they got involved with the project.
About 18 months ago, about a year and a half before Sundance, where it premiered this past January, Otto Bell came to my office. He was connected to me through a mutual friend of ours, Doug Scott, who's at that time the president of Ogilvy Entertainment. Otto was working for Ogilvy Entertainment as a producer. He's one of the heads of creative there. But he'd been shooting this thing on the side, spending his own money. He'd kind of gotten as far as he could, and he had about 10 minutes of raw footage that he was had put together into like a little teaser. And so Doug said, would you be interested in seeing him, talking to him? I'm like, of course, have him come down. So he came to the office. He showed me this 10 minutes of footage. I was blown away. I showed it to Jeremy, and I was like, we have to make this movie. I was like, we're in. And so we basically came on at that point. I said, we'll help you raise the money. We'll get the crew. We did all the post-production at our place in New York City. And we basically helped him make the movie and actually understand what it takes to kind of finish the film. And I think that sometimes you need that shepherd to help you through. And I was glad we got to be there with that film. It's a special movie.
But also, we also love about it, not in a dissimilar way to Rats. It's a very, we talk about this all the time, like documentaries, I think, unfairly get lumped into one category. They're documentaries first, and how...
And that's all they are.
That's all they are.
And every doc, and whether it's Eagle Hunters or it's Rats, they're all documentaries.
Or a concert film, or,
Yeah, and it's very frustrating for us, I think, just because regular narrative films get all the nuance they want,
You can be a romance, you can be
a thriller.
It's exactly right. So, and I think what attracts us, about keeping with docs and trailers, how do you push those formats so that it's what those are first and what more is like Eagle Huntress is a fairy tale. It's a fairy tale before it's anything else, and it just so happens to be true. Rats we look at, it's a horror movie, and it just so happens to be true. So anytime we see films that come to us, that are like that, it's really exciting to work on projects like that.
I think the more that we get to tell stories like that, help filmmakers get movies like that made, get more out into the universe, I think the better it is. I mean, I feel like I was really blessed after Super Size Me with not only the chance to make movies, but also to help other filmmakers.
I want to thank Morgan Spurlock and Jeremy Chilnick for speaking with me. You can watch their film Rats on the Discovery Channel. Before we go, I want to draw attention to an unfolding story in North Dakota where several people have been arrested for documenting protests of oil pipelines. Two prominent arrests were the actress Shailene Woodley, who was filming for Facebook Live, and journalist Amy Goodman, reporting for Democracy Now! Another documentary filmmaker arrested was Dea Schlossberg, a producer for Josh Fox, best known for Gasland. Dea produced his new film called How to Let Go of the World and Love All the Things Climate Can't Change. Josh Fox has posted video updates on his Facebook page about Dea's case. Here's a clip from one.
She was filming. She was not participating in. She was filming. Now, a lot of you understand that the Dakota Access Pipeline is being protested in Standing Rock. This was another action shutting down pipelines that were along the United States-Canada border. Activists went to the emergency shutoff valves of tar sands pipelines and said this tar sands oil cannot come from Canada into the United States. These are emergency shutoff valves. It is a climate change emergency, and we are shutting these pipelines down. Dea, my good friend, one of my best friends in the world, was filming the event, and she was arrested for being an accessory. She was not an accessory. She was the media. The media is allowed to report on actions that are happening. They nabbed her, they confiscated her camera, they took her footage. And it gets worse. She was escorted to the courthouse where she was charged with 3 felony charges that carry 45 years maximum sentence combined. Whatever you think about the protests, journalists doing their job should not be arrested in the United States of America. Journalists doing their job should not have their footage confiscated as they would be in a dictatorial regime.
This case is chilling to say the least for documentary filmmakers. For more updates, watch the Facebook page of Josh Fox. Pure Nonfiction is distributed by the TIFF Podcast Network. Thanks to our team, series producer Michael Scotti Jr., sound mixer Kyle Murphy, web designer Cross Strategy, marketing coordinator Sarah Modo, social media master Jordan Smith, and executive producer Rafaela Nehausen. I'm Tom Powers. You can follow me on Twitter at THOMPowers. If you're in New York City this fall, you'll find me on Tuesday nights at IFC Center for Stranger Than Fiction, presenting a retrospective of documentaries by Jonathan Demme running through November 1st. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe on iTunes. We'll be back next Thursday. Until then, you can read our show notes, learn about live events, and sign up for our newsletter at purenonfiction.net.